here for the seventh episode of the Payoff Pitch. Quinn, you want to end with any last words?
Um, no, not really much to say. I really hope the Mets can just do a little bit. Just hit. You don't have to worry about the bullpen if you just hit and do your job. But I think it was a really good show today. Got a lot in NFL, we got MLB, we got NBA, and then of course enjoy the Masters because the Masters is going to be awesome. That always is great. But yeah, that's going to do it for us here on the Payoff Pitch. You said the 7th edition?
Yeah.
Already the 7th edition. Wow. Okay. Well, stay right here on VIC Radio. We got Undercovered with Laura Lagarde and Emily Adams next. Stay right here.
Listen to Real Sad Lad Hours Mondays 10 to midnight on VIC Radio.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to Undercovered. We are finally back in the studio this week after a bit of a hiatus. I'm Emily Adams.
And I'm Laura Lagarde.
And we are here to talk to you about the Undercovered issues in sports this week. So let's jump right into it.
Yeah, the first topic that we're going to discuss, I'm sure many of you have seen it circling around the news, but it is about Philip Adams. Philip Adams was a retired football player for the NFL, and he I can't remember what day it was. I believe it was it Wednesday or Thursday?
Yeah, sometime mid last week.
Yeah, that he fatally shot a doctor, his wife, 2 of their grandkids, one of the workers in their house, and shot another victim who is in critical condition at this point. He also ended up shooting himself, which is awful for just everyone at all parties in this. Right now, there is discussion about going into for the autopsy and looking into Philip's head for any CTE, which is, let me go to exactly, because I want to give you the full name of it.
I have it up here. It is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a bit of a mouthful, but colloquially known as CTE, and it's caused by repeated blows and injuries to the head.
And as we know, the NFL has had there was an ongoing investigation. It since has gotten better when it comes to looking into concussions, taking concussions more seriously, especially with these athletes, because they get constant blows to the head, and they have improved on the helmets, but it's still something that can occur. It's not like this is something that is fades away.
No, and I think that's the big thing. Obviously, it's horrible for the family of the victims. It's horrible for his family to see someone that they his dad has said that we thought he was a good guy, like we didn't it's just such a tragic story for everyone involved. And I think the big thing that we want to bring it back to when we're talking about it is the real danger that the NFL is posing not just to its players but also like to society at large. It's hard to put accountability on these players when they, especially back, 10, 20, 30 years ago,
exactly.
Nobody, they didn't know what they were getting themselves into.
Not at all.
They didn't know, the long-term impacts of this. And I think now we're starting to get into the age where we're really seeing that, and I think it's an important conversation to have, because this isn't the first time that, a former NFL athlete has, committed a violent crime against other people. It's not the first time that a former NFL athlete has, ultimately committed suicide. And that's a pretty common outcome for people with severe cases of CTE. And, I think what we really need to unpack a little bit is, like, can football be fixed? Or do we need to have the discussion of, can we keep playing the sport in good conscience?
I think there also goes to the conversation about not just playing the sport, but also making sure that the athletes are okay after the sport and after they retire. And I think that needs to be taken more seriously and strictly, because the thing is that not like you see some athletes as soon as they retire, they become sideline reporters, they become broadcasters, very prominent people. Like, look at Michael Strahan. Like, you see that they become these huge icons, and they're in their Hall of Fame and everything. But then there are the athletes that don't get to that point. Yeah. All they had was the sport, and they might not be the best, so they'll be hopping around from team to team to team, only making below the salary that they want to be at. So they don't have a lot of money going out of this. They only have, like, let's say 4.6 million, which is a lot for many people. But over the span of your lifetime, bills pile up. Right. And then you might not have a job. You might not be able to, you might not have all the things or the support from your former coaches, your former administration, your former teammates. So, and if you're also dealing with a potential of having CTE, then things just pile up and start declining rapidly. And that's what Adam's father was saying. It's just like, he said, I think that football messed him up.
Yeah. And I think, like, obviously we don't know yet if he had
there's
CTE,
no results
but yet. It's a pretty safe assumption to say that he did.
He sustained 2 concussions.
And I think the thing, he sustained 2 that we know about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing is that, a lot of CTE studies and things have shown that it's the small ones when, every game you take a hit and you get rattled, and it's not bad enough for it to be diagnosed as a concussion, but it's still a trauma to your head, and that over time piles up and piles up and piles up. And I think, like, the thing with CTE, to me, I think that's so sort of scary is that it's not reversible. Once it happens, and we're not just seeing it in 50-year-old NFL players.
No, they're men that are late 30s.
And we're also, there have been cases of college athletes. Just a couple of years ago at the University of Pennsylvania, there was a young football player who ultimately committed suicide. And when they autopsied his brain, they found CTE, and he was 21, 22. So, like, that's the thing is it's affecting even when you go back to the high school level, there have been kids who they've been able to see early signs of it, and I think, I've listened to, there's a podcast by Malcolm Gladwell, who's a writer for the New Yorker that I really enjoy. Highly recommend everyone check out his podcast, Revisionist History. But he did an episode a couple years ago that I think was what really, like, opened me up to this issue in football, called The Burden of Proof. And what he talks about in that episode is the student at Penn. And he talks about a study by the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which does this type of work with autopsies and studying the brains of former athletes for CTE. So the thing with CTE is that it's very hard to diagnose until after someone has passed away. And you pretty much have to do a brain autopsy to be able to see it. So of the brains that they had autopsied, they autopsied 53 college players, 48 of them had CTE. They autopsied 111 NFL players, 110 had CTE. So, the stats are staggering with this, really, that, it's affecting so many people. And the point that Gladwell made in his podcast was, at what point is something deadly enough for us to call it off, for us to say enough is enough? Because, he compared it to like coal mining back in the 1900s, where, so many people were presenting with like horrible lung diseases and things because of that we stopped, doing it the way that we had been, and we stopped, letting people down into mines for hours and hours at a time. And, the question that he posed was what is enough proof? And I think that's what we're seeing here. And I think, really tragic incidents like this bring attention to it, and then we sort of forget. And I think that's the really concerning thing about it, is that I think we're not taking seriously enough just how many players this has affected, is affecting, and will affect.
100%, especially going, like you were saying before, this isn't just on a professional level. This is on a college level. This is on a high school level. And the thing about athletes, and I'm sure you can relate, Emily, because we're both athletes. Sometimes when you're hurt, you don't want to say anything because you don't want to limit your playtime. And especially on the professional level, you don't want to say you're hurt, because what happens when you are hurt and you can't play? You don't get your money.
Yep.
And I think that's that type of power dynamic that your organization has against you is just further going to hurt these athletes.
Yep.
They're always going to think, you know what, I'm not going to say anything. This has already happened over and over again. If I say this again, then my pay is going to get lowered. I can't do that. Or I'm not going to be able to become a free agent.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be, they're going to keep me. They're going to extend my contract. I can't go someplace else.
Yeah. When I think you look at even like, I think back to, a couple of instances, I'm from Philadelphia, big Eagles fan. And I believe it was 2019 was when Carson Wentz had his concussion right at the end of the season. And he took himself out of that game. And people online were just like railing into that. They were like, Carson Wentz is weak and he doesn't have it. And I'm not the biggest Carson Wentz fan in the world, but I 100% loved and respected that move. I was like, and I think it's so important for people to see like prominent athletes like that, for people to see a first string quarterback do that and sit out of a game that's really important because of a head injury, because they know how major that is, and that sends a message, don't play with head injuries. And I think, then the way that, sports fans and the sports media landscape handled that, I think ruined what a good thing that could have been, because then everyone watching saw that and went, oh, Carson Wentz is
they bring in that whole hyper masculine nature.
Right. And I think, and then, you think about Patrick Mahomes this season, who was taken out of a game because of concussion protocols right at the end of the season. And then suddenly he was back for the playoffs and he was totally fine. And I don't know, I personally have not had a concussion, but my younger sister had two, one of which was really severe when she was younger from playing soccer, which, soccer is also a really high concussion sport. And that's not, even a minor concussion is minimum 3 week to a month recovery. He's not okay the next Sunday to be playing a high contact, high level football game again.
Think about it. When you have a concussion on it's very hard to be around loud noises.
Mhm.
It's hard to be in light.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and most games are played in light.
Yep.
Pressure, like stomping, running, any sort of like footwork, that can be causes of like that is pressure and it's hurting your head.
Yeah.
A concussion, as you said, it is not something that is healed in a day, 2 days, a week. It takes a minute.
Yeah.
And it's just like what you gotta make sure, of course you want to make sure like your team can win and everything, but you gotta make sure you're okay with your health, because
Right.
the thing about your health is that if you don't take care of it now, it's going to have some serious repercussions later on in your life.
Yep. And I think, too, I think it's hard, as I love watching the NFL. I'm a huge football fan. But it's hard to watch, I think, sometimes, and to have in the back of your head, it's hard to justify it to myself, to go, I'm watching a sport that I know is hurting people, and I know is ruining people's brains for like irreversibly. And that's so, it's really hard to reckon with, and it's hard to come to terms with. And I think that's, why the discussion around CTE is so sort of serious, and why we're not really unpacking, like, is it ethical to still play football? Because, I would argue that it's not, but I also love football,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to keep watching it if it's going to keep playing. And, I think that's the real struggle that I have, is that I know how bad the sport is, and other fans know how the sport is, and the NFL knows how bad the sport is. And we're all just sort of sitting here, waiting to do anything about it.
No, we are. And, I'm just hoping that, but, this is what I'm saying. I'm hoping, because I don't know if this will happen, because there have been too many cases like this.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows? And hopefully this is, but who knows if this will ever be the last type of case that we'll ever see about this. But
I mean, we had another one with, the
mm-hmm.
the man who drove a car through the barricades of the Capitol, a week and a half ago, was also a former football player, also being looked at for CTE symptoms.
Exactly. So, on the last words with this, Emily and I first, like we said before, we are our condolences and our love, and this goes out to both families in this party, because it's just awful, awful. And yeah.
Alrighty, we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about racism in the NWSL.
At VIC, the voice of Ithaca College, we prioritize diversity and inclusion. We are working to ensure that more voices are heard. We support and will continue to support the Black Lives Matter movement and victims of police brutality and racial injustice. We've heard you, we support you, we must advocate for change. Black Lives Matter.
I know, a great segue, really.
Having a hard time remembering that girl from Winslow, Arizona? The one with the flatbed Ford? Well, kick your feet up, because DJ Dog has got the tunes to help you remember. Every Thursday, 6 to 8 on the Kickback, you can join me, DJ Dog, for some nostalgia, some memories, some even better classic rock from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and a whole host of other great tunes right here on VIC.
Alrighty, we are back, and let's chat about what's going on in the NWSL, because I personally am a fan of the NWSL. I have played soccer a lot growing up. I'm a big U.S. Women's National Team fan, but the NWSL, you know, has a history of, and women's soccer in general, I want to say it has a really long history of being very active advocates for women, and in a lot of cases for the LGBTQ plus community. They're not good allies when it comes to race. And I think we saw some of that this summer when they were playing in the Challenge Cup as the Black Lives Matter movement gained a lot of traction. And we're seeing it now when they literally just returned to play. So yeah, you wanna talk about the incident a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk about it. So, well, as Emily and I do, we message each other about what we're gonna be talking about for the show. And Emily sent me a link to this tweet from Sarah Gordon. Sarah Gordon, for anyone who doesn't know, she is a professional soccer player for the Chicago Red Stars. Her Twitter thread said in her first tweet, "My boyfriend came out to our game against Houston Dash. After the game, he came down the steps to talk to me. We were immediately before he was too close to me, followed by security, and told he would be arrested if he came close. Meanwhile, white players were talking to white fam is family, all over the stadium." Her next tweet said, "At first, I didn't realize this was a racial issue until I saw white Houston Dash players surrounding the stadium talking closely to their family, and we were the only ones targeted." Mm-hmm. She later said in her next tweet, "I asked the security guard why he was only talking to us. He said he would go to them later. He never approached any of them. These players have multiple photos with other people." Next tweet said, "This is just another reason why we kneel." Which I think summed it up perfectly. Yeah. Because that is another reason why they kneel, because clearly this is how I'm reading it, is that she was racially profiled. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know any other way to not see it, because, listen, I'll get a little personal and say that, like, reading this is all too familiar. Mm-hmm. Because I've been racially profiled when going into a store. I have been followed. I have had people think that I have stolen when I didn't, clearly. And the anger, the frustration, the sadness, the fear that you have, because it's a fear of the unknown, because you don't know how that situation is going to play out, is so traumatizing on so many different levels. And I'm happy that she genuinely asked the security guard and brought it up to him, being like, "Yo, what's up?" But I kind of knew what the scenario was going to play out to be when he didn't do anything, because it happens so many times, and it's so frustrating. And the fact that it happens to someone like me, who's a private citizen, and then it happens to someone like her, who is a public figure, who is a player, and then seeing that all these other white players are having close contact in the pandemic. They're not being talked to at all. Nothing. They're being let to do whatever they need to do. Mm-hmm. But of course, she is the one that's getting in trouble.
Yeah. And I think one of the really, really disturbing things with the story is that the security guard was threatening her boyfriend with arrest. So we have a security guard threatening a Black man with arrest for
what?
Violating COVID protocols, which they hadn't apparently violated yet. You know, she said that her boyfriend hadn't even come close to her yet, but before, he was just walking down when the security guard stopped him. Like, that's a really, to threaten any Black person, and especially a Black man, with arrest is a really, really serious thing to do, particularly, seeing everything that we saw this summer surrounding police violence and, the inequities in our criminal justice system for, Black Americans. To threaten somebody with that for trying to spend time with their family member who's come to their game is, I mean, just like the nonchalance of that is just so disturbing to me.
Yeah.
And I just don't, after everything that we saw this summer, it's such an obvious indication that nothing has really changed.
No, and I feel like that's what a lot of people assume so much. Like, they think that racism has stopped for some reason. And I don't and that's just not true. As like you said, we could see it with everything going on with Black lives in the world, the Asian community right now, Native Americans, people in the Latino community. It has not stopped. And as you were saying before, with just threatening a Black man with arrest, the fact that you have the privilege to promote your dominance of power over this man and this way, it's so dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And like, I think because when I think of asserting that dominance, because majority of the times when you hear of the stories about police asserting their dominance towards Black men or Black people in general, I don't think of a happy ending. What I think of is Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rashard Brooks, Cece Jackson, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, Myra Thompson, Alton Sterling. And those are just names that we know, There's a lot of stories that aren't out there. So, but this man was that he took a happy moment and cheerfulness and washed it away.
And I want to address too, the sort of bigger issue within the NWSL, and I think it's very reflected in Houston's statement about the incident, because they don't mention race at all in the statement. They don't address the security guards' actions at all. The only thing that is made clear in their statement is that they indicate that the Dash players violated COVID protocols by visiting with their family, and they're assuring the player from the Red Stars, who they don't name, that their staff was focused on COVID safety, and they apologized to her and the club for anything that may have created an impression to the contrary. And it's just so, it's just so weak.
Yeah.
It's such a weak statement, and it's so, and I think that is such a frustrating thing to me from the NWSL, because women's sports have always been the sort of mouthpiece for advocacy in the sports space, and we've seen the WNBA take on that role
100%.
and own their support
and
for
also tennis,
Black
well.
lives and tennis too, as individuals. But from you look at like a full league perspective, I think the WNBA has, just so intensely embraced that and upheld that and you know, and then you look at the NWSL and it's so subpar, and it's not just with this incident. You know, it's been, you know, over the summer, you know, Black NWSL players were talking about how, you know, they felt the burden of having to educate all their teammates and having to educate, you know, their clubs and their coaching staffs, and that was really exhausting for them, you know. And white NWSL players tend to be silent a lot of the time when it comes to issues of race. You know, we've seen really prominent players, you know, in the NWSL and who also play for the women's national team. You know, Julie Ertz has refused to kneel for the national anthem, even with the understanding of what that represents. Carly Lloyd has chosen to stand for the national anthem. And I think, you know, I think they talked about this on Burn It All Down a little while ago. I'm pretty sure that's where I heard it. But, you know, they talked about how kneeling has sort of become less of a protest and more of the most baseline way to show support for the Black community and to recognize the oppression that the United States stands on. And I think, you know, for someone like Julie kneeled over the summer. And then when the U.S. women's national team played, she chose not to. And I think that's really where it becomes an issue, because, you know, people are always going to choose to stand. And, you know, we've seen players who are like, well, my immediate family member was in the military and the national anthem means something to me, so I choose to stand. And, you know, I don't agree with that, but I'm also not going to openly fault you for that. Like, if you acknowledge, you know, I stand with Black Lives Matter, you know, I support my Black teammates, you know, this specific action isn't right for me. I you know, I don't agree, but I can understand it. To pull the reversal and to kneel when it was mainstream and when it was popular.
Yeah, that's where it's not sitting right with me either.
and I think that's, you know, we saw the NWSL put Black Lives Matter on their jerseys and stuff, and now
every,
you know, we're
every
seeing
single organization did that,
and we're seeing now, you know, racial profiling go completely unaddressed. And, you know, the league is supposedly investigating, but it's that initial response from the Dash that shows you what, you know, the culture is like within the league and within the organization, and where they're incredibly scared to talk about race and racism. And that is
100%.
the most dangerous thing.
100%. I think people are always afraid to talk about something that they feel like they don't know about. And no one ever wants to acknowledge, you know what, there's some racism going on here. And this needs to be addressed, because they don't want to address it. Like why would you want to address something where you feel like, oh, you know what, I don't think it's that big of a deal, or the fact that, like, you know what, it's not really like mainstream anymore. Like, no one's really like talking about it anymore. Like, it's not really an us problem anymore. So why do we need to put out like an apology to say that we have a fault when we don't really think that there's a fault in it? Like, what, like, that's how I'm reading it right now, with how they're thinking, because it has become so outrageous to me that people part of your organization are going through a trauma, and you have nothing to say from this, and you can't call out the security guard or anything that, like, I think Sarah Gordon said it the best at the end of her tweet. This is why we kneel. It's something like to let you all know You don't have to be called a derogatory term, a racist slur. You don't have, like, it doesn't have to be just a violent interaction with a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
It can be someone following you through the store, someone approaching you about something very minimal, but no one approaching any of the white people around you doing the same exact thing. Racism is still prominent, folks. Like, it's still here, it's still in the world, and just because you don't hear about it, or you don't personally see it, or you don't see it on another video on Instagram or Snapchat, does not mean that it has vanished. All right.
Yeah, and I think, or organizations need to be willing to take accountability for when things are racially motivated, and we need to stop dancing around the word racism.
Exactly.
All right, you want to take a quick break?
Yeah.
And we will come back. When we come back from commercial, we will be talking about the NCAA volleyball tournament. We got some interesting stuff going on there.
I would do anything for love, like catch a grenade, jump in front of a train, watch The Bachelor, slaying a fire-breathing dragon, or tuning in to Nothing But Love on VIC Radio Tuesdays, 11 to midnight.
Go from
As the midterms roll by and the testing quizzes pile up by the day,
Yeah,
you feel like you're a little in over your
so we'll
head?
take
Consider finding yourself a free tutor at the
15-ish on this,
ithaca.edu/tutoring
like
page
5.
online, getting yourself
family.
matched up with someone in whatever classes you need, and working out times that fit around your schedule
you ready?
so that you can focus on
Okay,
your
you want to
schoolwork.
introduce this?
Yeah, I can do that.
We have an app.
I wasn't ready.
Take VIC Radio with you on your iOS device.
You're
That's
funny.
right. The best of what's next
I
is
wasn't
available
ready.
wherever you go. Current song information, in-app access to social media, sleep timer, and alarm clock settings. It's all there. Download the VIC Radio app from the App Store today.
Alrighty, we are back, and let's chat about what's going on with the NCAA volleyball tournament. So, the Division I tournament right now is underway. They're competing on the heels of a successful NCAA basketball tournament, which just concluded last week.
Yeah, I'm still not talking to Emily about it.
But the NCAA volleyball tournament has already presented with
Problems.
several of the same kinds of inequities that we were seeing around the men's and women's basketball tournaments, and we talked about that a lot, on previous shows. I think too, the thing with volleyball, why we're seeing it be an undercovered issue and why we're bringing it up is because volleyball is a lot less popular than basketball. So it's getting a lot less traction outside of, women's sports spaces. And there's also no men's tournament to directly compare it to. So, it's a lot harder to observe the problems that are going on. So for a little rundown of what's happened, Emily Amon, who is a broadcaster for Athletes Unlimited, which is a league that does volleyball and softball and some other sports in kind of a unique format. She has been reporting that first, it came out that the tournament would not have broadcast crews and commentators at the first 2 rounds. So that's dozens of games that would just kind of be unbroadcasted, and ESPN had committed to broadcasting the entire event, and so it was confusing why they didn't have any live broadcast crews there. Then it came out that the convention center where the matches are being played, the practice courts are just court layered over cement flooring, which is high risk for injury in a sport like
Yeah.
volleyball where people are
Sliding,
jumping and diving
falling
and
on
sliding
it. Yeah.
constantly. And then, there was a report that coaches had been told that there would not be locker rooms available for all the teams until the Elite Eight, and players would have to like swap out of their warm-ups and into jerseys on the bench. So I'll drop in the NCAA statement just so we get kind of a baseline of where things are. The NCAA said that there will be secure changing areas on site for players, and they said that players were never expected to change on the bench. They also said that the flooring in the convention center has a felt underlay, as well as Terraflex floor over top of the underlay, and then the wood flooring on top. And then the regional finals, which is the Elite Eight, those matches are going to be played in an arena. And then they said that, as in previous years, there is no requirement to produce coverage or provide live commentary in the first and second rounds of the championship. And they said that ESPN committed to cover each match either via live stream or broadcast. So due to pandemic restrictions, there were going to be just live streams called remotely.
Oh my God, I can't.
Yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
I think,
Oh my
here's the thing is, and this is certainly me editorializing, and this is also my bias towards, trusting journalists over organizations, but I cannot imagine that Emily would have reported that the NCAA had told coaches that players were going to have to change out of warm-ups on the bench unless a coach had told her that, and a coach would not have told her that unless the NCAA told them that.
Exactly.
But I think the thing with that is that it's incredibly difficult to prove.
Mm-hmm.
There's not going to be any policy laying that out. So it's kind of a he said, she said.
Exactly.
But the same thing for things like the flooring. But the broadcasting, they can't cover up.
No.
And that is the one, I think, where
that's why I laughed.
It's the most obvious that the NCAA didn't once again didn't put the necessary time and effort into the championship, and they weren't prepared to respond when people criticized it.
Exactly. They literally I love how they put in, we're doing this because of safety protocols for COVID. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, but clearly that wasn't the case for the basketball tournament, for women and men's. That wasn't that wasn't an argument at all. That had to be broadcast. That had to, and it's because, as Emily said, basketball is it brings in more attraction for people. It does.
Certainly.
It does. You can see the ratings with it. But don't try to be sly and say it's because of COVID safety precautions when that clearly was not the case when it came to
a week ago.
Exactly. And there's also less teams for the volleyball tournament than there were for both men and women.
Yeah, and I don't want to say,
let's not make that into an argument here, NCAA.
ESPN has since then committed to having live commentary teams and broadcasting all of the games in the tournament. But again, it's too little too late. It's after you got called out, now you're going to provide the resources. And I think, it's just the same story over and over and over again. And I wish, even, volleyball obviously is less popular than basketball, and that's just sort of a reality, that's fine. But, first of all, volleyball is one of the few sports where it's more prevalent for women than it is for men. Men's volleyball exists at the NCAA level.
Yeah.
It's much smaller and much less popular than women's volleyball. So that's number one. Number two is that we're in an Olympic year right now. And sports like volleyball see their most popularity during Olympic years. You see it with sports like swimming and track. They gain traction during Olympic years because people want to see the prospects.
Exactly.
And, you know, even still, even knowing that there's going to be attention on it, they're not willing to invest. They're not willing to, you know, put their money where their mouth is on how much they care about
All
gender
their
equality
sports.
and unity
Mhm.
and actually make things equitable. And, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, the volleyball tournament needs to have all the fanfare and be broadcasted on CBS every night. You know, that's to some point, that's not necessarily realistic, but there is certainly more demand than what they're giving it.
100%.
And, you know, to have ESPN, you know, commit to this is a big deal. And to have these games on ESPN channels is a big deal. And then to just offer them as live streams is ridiculous. I mean, it just takes away everything. For the first 2 rounds, like, that's how you become invested in these teams.
Exactly.
That's how you see who you're interested. Like, nobody cared about, you know, say, Oral Roberts or Abilene Christian
They
or
only
Loyola
started
Chicago
caring.
until that first round, until
Exactly.
they pull off those wins, and suddenly you're interested. And that's how you keep people coming back to the sport, and that's how you keep people engaged in the tournament. And so by cutting out all of those first rounds, you're also cutting out all of those teams who aren't going to make it out of the first round, but who still, you know, played an entire season outside of their normal season, who, you know, have gone through everything with COVID to be at this tournament, and they're not even going to get to, you know, play for fans. They're not even going to get to, you know, play on broadcast and get some reward for everything that they've done. And I think it's just so disappointing to see that they were called out a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, about the women's tournament, and we're right back here with volleyball.
I think the part that's like, because I'm really happy that you brought this up in in something that you said previously about what the NCAA and what they were saying, and how you said that your own bias shows believing in journalists over the organization in this case. I also agree with you with that, because as we saw previously with what Mark Emmert had to say about PCR antigen testing, and how he said that everyone was being treated equally with that. And it's not the case, because I think, like said in one of our earlier discussions before, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, that PCR testing is more accurate than the antigen testing. I have a really hard time believing in things that Mark Emmert has to say, because it's like, okay, like you clearly have already shown that your disconnect and your disinterest in this sport itself. So for many people, it would be like, well, why should I believe in you and what you have to say at this point? I feel like I'm so happy that the coaches said something, but I want to bring up the discussion on, because I haven't seen anything about many of many of the athletes posting about this. And we were previously discussing before how so many times you see that women athletes don't always say something because they are constantly either threatened, or they have some sort of like power, like being controlled upon them.
Yeah. And I wonder too if that's sort of because, you know, when you look at somebody like a Sedona Prince, you know, who really sort of broke the story about the inequities inside the bubble, for most people, you know, she already had a pretty major following on
Social media,
places like
Instagram.
TikTok.
Yeah.
She was already had a really large following on TikTok before this all happened. I think, for volleyball, which is a less mainstream sport, a lot of those players don't have those same platforms and don't have that same power to wield. And, things like having a broadcast could change that.
Yeah. It's just, this was honestly just like a slap in the face. Like, it was like that slap in the face, like, oh, we don't really care and we're not going to go all out. And like, so be it if like we can't broadcast you for 2 rounds. What does that really do? That just shows that you don't understand the sport itself and the importance. And like, yeah, we're in an Olympic year. And volleyball, if I'm not mistaken, is one of those top tier rated sports.
It's a major sport in the Olympics. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so many people watch it. And the fact that you cannot even do a play-by-play on the volleyball match, that is about 20 to 30 minutes.
Well, and this is something that I think about too, is like, we say that volleyball is less popular and there's less demand for it. But, the thing is, the primary audience for the Olympics isn't sports fans.
No.
It's like middle-aged women, I think, is like the demographic that, is shown to give the Olympics the most viewership. And I think this is a problem with all sports, is that we say it's not popular because it's not popular among male sports fans of a certain age. And I think we're not targeting, sport media organizations aren't targeting those niche sport areas, and they're not targeting audiences that aren't the traditional sports audience. And I think, even from like a business perspective, there's so much untapped money there, and by constraining sports and what audience sports content is targeted towards, to mostly cishet white men, we're really dramatically limiting the amount of sports that can be popular.
Yeah, we are. It's just like the moment that we feel like we're going in a right direction one time, we're instantly put to a halt once again.
And we see this tie into the bigger investigation too that is now, going on. Our, IC professor, Dr. Ellen Starowski, is actually, she's working with the NCAA on, or not with the NCAA, but with the firm that's the NCAA has commissioned to, investigate gender inequity, which is a good sign, because she's wonderful.
Yes.
And she
amazing professor. I have nothing but hope.
But I think that internal review and that investigation is going to be very telling, because that review is supposed to encompass all of the sports. So this volleyball championship will be included in that, as well as the basketball tournament.
And who knows what else is going on.
And truly, and I think it'll be interesting to see, because we've seen this back to back now. We saw it with women's basketball, and then even despite massive public outcry, we're seeing it now with volleyball. And I think it'll be very telling to see what the findings of that investigation come back as, because if they're not sort of damning for the NCAA, I'll be very surprised.
Right.
Because, the fact that we're still seeing these issues after they just took an enormous PR hit for 3 weeks, I mean, there's no other explanation other than that this, the inequities that the NCAA allows are so deeply rooted and systemic in the way that their events are structured and organized and planned that they can't even adapt to avoid another PR storm.
At this point, I kind of thrive for NCAA PR apologies. I think it might be one of my guilty pleasures because I just think they're just so terrible, Emily. Like, yeah. I just don't understand. Like, you gotta like even if it's not an apology, get someone who's gonna write you a better fake apology. Like, come on. I'm done. On that note,
we're laughing so we don't cry.
Yeah.
So now
it's a coping mechanism, everyone.
We've had a heavy day today. We've had some pretty tough topics.
But
so
there's also the good in sports
yeah.
that we are going to get to.
So
right
let's hop into our fan moments for the week to give you guys a little positive note to leave on.
Exactly.
Alora, do you want to kick us off?
I would love to because I gotta bring track and field into this right now.
Ooh, okay.
So Sha'Carri Richardson, amazing runner. She is. It's kind of scary to say. I'm pretty sure she is younger than me.
Yeah, I think she's what, sophomore? Maybe
I don't
junior?
know. She's younger than me.
She
I don't want to feel old, Emily. Thank you very much. She just dropped this amazing 100-meter time. Mm-hmm. She had a 10.72.
Yeah.
And that's really fast, everyone.
For those who don't know track, that's really fast.
To put in comparison, Florence Griffith-Joyner, Flojo, love her. May she rest in peace. Her Olympic time, which still holds the world record, was a 10.49 for the 100-meter dash. Amazing time. Amazing time. Sha'Carri has not even scratched the surface yet.
She's in college and she's 0.3 behind the world record.
I think she might
less than 3 tenths. Yeah.
And I am so positive. I don't know if she's gonna beat Flojo's record.
Yeah, that'd be a bold take.
But I do think that she will beat Carmelita Jetter's record.
Oh,
I definitely do think that will happen. And I think we just got to give it a little bit more time. But who knows? Who knows what's going to be happening?
Well, and let's talk about how stacked, the NCAA women's track and field has been, because she was number 6 all time, dropping a 10.72. That's number 6.
And that's, think about right now. That is just in April.
Mm-hmm.
The Olympics is in August.
Yep.
And we are still in, even though if she was in a warmer climate, we're not even you really have to think about it.
When
she has competition where she just ran, because she ran at the Miramar Invitational, right? But let's put her against Shelly Ann Fraser-Price. Okay, let's put her against her. And them running against each other. Shelly Ann is she's a little bit older now, okay, but let's not take that away. Allison Felix had a baby, and then she has the most medals out of any Olympic runner. So let's just say I am excited to see where Sha'Carri goes later on in her life.
Absolutely.
And now on this road to Olympic gold.
Yeah, that's a good one. My fan moment is a little less performance-based, but it's something I've been having a ton of fun with this weekend. The new WNBA jerseys were released, and they are fire. Oh my gosh, have you seen these jerseys?
Yeah, I have.
They're amazing.
They're so nice.
I mean, check them out if you have not seen them yet. They're all over. My personal favorite is the Chicago jerseys.
Okay.
I think they're incredible. I'm a Seattle Storm fan, but and theirs are amazing. I'm looking at giving the WNBA all my money, but the Chicago ones really popped off.
See, I love I'm looking at them right now. I am such an Atlanta girl. I didn't have to even scroll down anymore. That's it.
they're so like, I feel like, I don't know. NBA jerseys are kind of boring. They're kind of boring.
See, I've realized every NBA jersey I have bought, I feel like I can't buy them anymore because I feel like whenever I buy one, I end up in disappointment. Except that one time, my dad bought me when we went to my first Knicks game, he bought me a Carmelo Anthony jersey, and they were in Game 7 against the Pacers, and they won. So that's my lucky jersey. But then I was like, oh, you know what? Let me go get a Kevin Knox jersey. I got a Kevin Knox jersey. Of course, that was the game that he hurt himself. And I was like, I'm never buying a jersey again.
I'm telling you, these WNBA jerseys, they're so cool, and I'm so glad that they did new jerseys for this year because it drives up the hype. The draft is next week. I mean, I'm excited. I am so stoked for what we're gonna see from the WNBA this season. So that's my little. I was just so excited when those got released this week. Alrighty, well, we are out of time for this fine Sunday morning. So we are going to head out. I believe you have the weekly pitch coming up next. So we'll let you guys head over there. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Start your weekend off right with No Sleep Till Noise Pollution from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Friday night. We'll be jamming out to music from all over the spectrum of rock, punk, folk, and every in between. You'll be on the edge of your seat with every show following a new theme. Some weeks will be focused on lyrics, some weeks will be focused on music, and some weeks will be focused on flat-out volume. It's the show that makes more speakers blast than Little Caesar makes pizzas. What better way to start off your weekend than with great lyricism and a killer guitar solo? No Sleep Till Noise Solution is the launch pad into the weekend that we all need. Want to make your